Hello there and welcome to this video. My name is Chris Jones. I'm the Field Applications Engineer for Secure Things. We're based out here in Cambridge in the UK. Today what I'd like to do is talk to you about the impact of legislation requirements on the IoT. So let's have a look at what we'll learn. So you should have a current status update on IoT security legislation, and I'm going to cover some of the IoT Codes of Practice that may help you with your design of a secure IoT product. The type of audience we're looking for are engineers who are embarking on the development of an IoT product, engineers interested in securing their IoT product, and of course managers who are needing to control secure development. So let's go ahead with the webinar. So one of the things that's very interesting is that security is now the leading barrier for IoT adoption. This has come out in a recent research project. So you can see here on the right hand side that there's very large numbers involved when it comes to IoT connections in the future. These numbers are getting so large that they're almost meaningless. But the interesting thing is that over 70% of enterprise customers would purchase more IoT devices if security was addressed. So it's clearly becoming quite a concern for end customers. The scary thing is less than 4% of new IoT devices include sufficient security. That's quite scary today. And one of the things behind that is there's basically a massive lack of cybersecurity skills across the IoT industry. So applications need to remain secure across the life cycle to comply with new legislation. This is important to realize that it's not only the actual initial hardware design and software development of your IoT product that you must consider, but the actual complete life cycle of when the product is actually in the hands of the end customer and may have been there for some time. So we're talking about secure software updates that are very important, secure update policies. These need to be considered when designing your IoT product. So here's some examples of some security breaches that have been in the press, which have probably added to the concern that customers have of actually buying IoT products. So let's have a look at a definition of security. So I have one here that's applicable to IT, but is relevant to IoT security. So as it says here, the goal of IT security is to minimize the vulnerability of the value and the resources of any IT system. And that's very important and is very much applicable to the design and development of an IoT product. So we have here a few security design criteria. So one of the things you should look at is that the actual security concept of your whole development should be provable and as simple as possible. Security is quite complex, but try to keep it as simple as you possibly can. Let's have a closed security concept based on a common root of trust. This is very important. And also, let's not have security by obscurity. So if you're going to be using cryptographic algorithms, make sure that there's a strong cryptographic mechanism and they are public, the algorithms that you use are public and are verified by many experts. The design principle of need to know is also very important. So this is where a user or process has exactly the necessary rights and no more. Also, that the security is proven by software design, coding guidelines and maintenance processes, all very important. So let's have a look at security legislation today. So looking at Europe, so those of you out there who are familiar with the GDPR are probably aware of the large fines that can be handed out if there's any breaches in this area. So you can see here examples of 20 million euros or 4% of the global revenue of a company. That does make the upper management certainly sit up and evaluate the amount of effort they put into ensuring security in their products. The UK government have taken quite a lead on the legislation side, and they have published 13 codes of practice, which I do recommend you go through. We will cover some of them later in the presentation. They are going to try and legislate and enforce these rules over the next few years, which is going to be very interesting. The ETSI, they've actually taken the guides and the codes of practice developed by the UK government, and they're looking at reiterating those. And the EU, they published 150 baseline recommendations, which a lot of them are also based on the UK 13 Codes of Practice. In North America, California have actually taken the first of the 13 Codes of Practice, the one referred to as the default password, and that's effective from January the 1st, 2020, that no products should be released without default password. And NIST, of course, are evolving the Cybersecurity Act in the US. In Asia, there's not a great deal of information, but we know that Singapore, their government has publicly outlined its approach to IT security, so that's a good start. Japan, because of the up-and-coming Olympics, they're making sure that their IT systems are secure, and they've passed some laws to allow the detection and examination of IoT products to make sure IoT products are safe. And they're also working with the Connected Consumer Device Security Council on, again, best practices. In Korea, the Ministry of Science and ICT and the Internet Security Agency are looking at certification. And in China, official standards have been released by government-sponsored working group. So everybody is beginning to see the importance of security in the IoT industry and moving towards legislation. The GDPR, which I mentioned earlier, so this is applicable to the IoT. The IoT is subject to GDPR legislation, and again, you can see some of the fines here are quite large. So the loss of consumer data can no longer be tolerated. There is a legal demand to ensure that all consumer data is encrypted, whether it's static, in flight, or in action, and managed in a highly constrained manner by all devices. So everybody has a responsibility in this area. EU is also driving existential threats. So there was recently an EU rapid alert issued for a dangerous product. This was to do with some weird child tracking smartwatch, which had to be removed from the market. So you can imagine how much that would cost an organisation if they had to withdraw all their products. Then there's a Cybersecurity Act, so it's part of a regulative framework driven by the EU. They're basically trying to harmonise all the certification standards for the member states. And the Cybersecurity Act, it's actually got these 3 security levels called basic, substantial and high, which is, again, it's a start. And for the public sector, such as healthcare, automotive, energy and finance, the highest level is envisaged. So things are moving in the EU too, which is great news. So legislation is being driven by the industry's lack of ability to self-regulate with best practice. So current guidelines are generally in the form of these best practices, but we are trying to, the governments are trying to legislate these best practices in order to give them some kind of teeth and push companies to focus on security. So many retailers and industry stakeholders are pushing for stronger legal frameworks, and they're expecting that punishments should be in line with the GDPR regulations. So guiding principles for legislation. So reducing the burden on consumers and supply chain by standardizing expectations. This is very important, but also quite difficult to try and put some kind of level of security, like a kite mark, I guess you would be looking at, and to show that one product is possibly more secure than another. Quite a difficult area, but something that needs to be looked at. Transparency to enable informed choices, measurability to compare and allow customers to judge whether the product they're buying is secure or not. And facilitation, I think, is very important, where companies should talk and share ideas of how best to implement security and make it as simple as possible for the end user. Resilience is very important as well, so that if there is damage, a device has a vulnerability has been shown and a device has been hit, then the product should have resilience and ensure that the whole system is not compromised. So we've talked about these codes of practice. So here's a quick précis of the codes of practice that's been developed by the UK government. So here we've got no default passwords, keep software updated, which is very important, securely store credentials and security sensitive data. That goes back to the GDPR regulations. Communicate securely, so use encryption methods for communication. Minimize the exposed attack surfaces. This is something that is often not considered and should be very early on in the project, to determine where a hacker could get in, what would they be looking for, and what would be the ROI on their attack. Ensure software integrity, protect personal data. Systems must be resilient to outages. Monitor the system telemetry data, that's also very important. This is certainly subject area for AI, where IoT systems will be monitored, and if any strange accesses or higher volumes of accesses begin on an IoT device, then IA could sense that there is possibly a problem here, a breach could be underway, and therefore take action. Allow easy deletion of personal data, of course. Easy installation and maintenance. This goes back to the end customer as well. Make it easy for the end customer to easily connect the device to their network. Make sure that it's simple to use and they understand what the security capability of the product is and for how long it will be incorporated. Validate input data is also important. Any signals that are coming into the product, A to D converters, data, all should be validated. So let's have a look at the codes of practice. The first one of the codes of practice is targeting passwords. And the idea is that each password released with an IoT product must be unique. This is probably one of the most important and easiest to implement. So all IoT device passwords must be unique and not resettable to any universal factory default value. This is where a lot of hacks have been exercised on an IoT product and have come up in the media. So many IoT devices are being sold with universal default usernames and passwords. A classic one is admin. And these are expected to be changed by the customer. But this is not what we need. We want to have unique passwords shipped with the product so that the end customer has to either write down a complex password or change it themselves. But very important, they don't have these simple default passwords. So as I said, ensure that default passwords and even default usernames are changed during the initial setup, and that weak, null or blank passwords are simply not allowed. Ensure password recovery or reset mechanism is robust and does not supply an attacker with information indicating a valid account. So don't give pre-information either. Protect against brute force and or other abusive login attempts. And username password information should be salted, hashed or encrypted, also very, very important and simple to implement. So the second most important code of practice is software and firmware updates. So all software components in IoT devices should be securely updatable. This is very important. Updates must be timely and not impact on the functioning of the device. Now I know you're probably familiar with regular updates to your mobile phone. You may think it's inconvenient, but it's important that those updates go ahead. It's important that your mobile phone manufacturer is sending them because it shows that their security is important. They are updating any vulnerabilities that have been exposed, and you can feel confident that your phone is secure. And this is the case for IoT devices too. An end-of-life policy must be published as well for all endpoint devices, and this must explicitly state the minimum length of time for which a device will receive software updates and the reason why. The need for each update should be made clear to consumers, and an update should be easy to implement. Software updates should be provided after the sale of a device and pushed to a device for a period appropriate to the device. This period of software update support must be made clear to the consumer when purchasing the product. So we do understand that products have a certain life cycle, so we don't expect a product to be updated in the field for 20 years, or something as ridiculous as that. But it must be made clear as to how long the software update is going to be implemented, and that the customer is clear about that. Now, in the case where an IoT device is constrained and cannot be physically updated, then the product should be isolatable and replaceable. And again, this must be made clear to the end user. Storing credentials. Any credentials must be stored securely within services and on devices. Hard-coded credentials in device software is not acceptable. It sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how many software products have this inside them, and it's important that the practice is stopped. Reverse engineering devices and applications can easily discover credentials such as hard-coded usernames and passwords. That's fairly straightforward. Simple obfuscation methods, also used to obscure or encrypt this hard-coded information, can be trivially broken. Security-sensitive data should be stored securely, and this includes, for example, cryptographic keys and initialization vectors. So these are critical pieces of information about the security of the device, and they must be stored securely. So secure, trusted storage mechanisms should be used, such as those provided by a trusted execution environment and associated trusted secure storage. So it's important that the intelligence in the IoT device, in most cases this will be a small MCU, you should choose the best secure MCU possible for that product. There are many secure MCUs out there in the field at the moment, and they have varying amounts of cryptographic capability. You must review this capability, obviously, against the price requirements of the device, but it's important that you try to have the most secure MCU as possible in your product. So let's have a look at communication. So you should ensure that communication security is provided and that it is using state-of-the-art standardized security protocols. TLS is a good example of this, which is available for most websites and server-client exchanges. Ensure that credentials are not exposed in internal or external network traffic. That comes with capabilities such as TLS. Guarantee data authenticity to ensure reliable exchanges from data emission to data reception. Data should always be signed whenever and wherever it is captured and stored. Again, very important and a very powerful security capability. Do not trust data received, and always verify any interconnections. Discover, identify, and verify, authenticate the device is connected to the network before trust can be established. So make sure you understand who you are talking to and verify that you are talking to that IoT device, and basically go through an authentication process. This is also an important one, which is minimizing the attack surfaces. So all devices and services should operate in the principle of least privilege. So any unused ports that, for instance, are used on the device must be closed. Hardware should not unnecessarily expose access. So any GPIO pins that may be on the PCB, make sure that you don't route them out to the PCB if they're not used, allowing anybody access. This is a classic case with any debug ports that are still exposed on PCBs. Try to close down the device. I know this is a problem for end testing, but it does help with security. Services should not be available if they are not used. Again, simple idea, but very powerful. Code should be minimized to the functionality necessary for the service to operate. So please don't leave unwanted code in there, or code that was used during development in the end product. Software should run with appropriate privileges, taking account of both security and the functionality. This principle of least privilege is a foundation stone of good security engineering, applicable to IT as much as to any other application.
Software integrity is a very important issue for IoT devices. As it says here, software on IoT devices must be verified using a secure boot mechanism. You'll find that most secure MCUs have some kind of boot mechanism whereby the boot process is immutable, i.e. It cannot be interfered with, and that the image that has been installed on the device can be checked by the boot process. If an authorized change is detected, the device should alert the consumer or administrator to an issue and should not connect to wider networks than those necessary to perform the alerting function. So if that IoT device does boot up and the boot mechanism determines that the image loaded has been tampered with, then it should try to communicate that to a consumer or administrator. As it says here, not go to wider networks. Also, it's important that code that is sent to an IoT device is cryptographically signed. This can ensure that the software hasn't been tampered with during the transportation to the IoT device. And this helps with making sure that malicious attacks do not overwrite code after it's been loaded.
So let's have a look at personal data protection. This has come up in some earlier slides. So where a device or a service processes personal data, they should do so in accordance with data protection laws. Device manufacturers and IoT service providers must provide consumers with clear and transparent information about how their data is being used, by whom and for what purpose. Where personal data is processed on the basis of consumers' consent, this must be validly and lawfully obtained, with those consumers being given the opportunity to withdraw at any time. You've probably seen this on websites or emails where you can actually unsubscribe, and this is one of the key elements of this particular law. Consumers should also be provided with guidance on how to securely set up the device, as well as how they may eventually securely dispose of it. So let's have a look at resilience. It's very important that resilience is actually designed into IoT services. We are becoming more and more dependent on these services, and we need to make sure that they remain operating and functional. So IoT systems and devices are relied upon by consumers for increasingly important use cases that may be safety relevant or life impacting. So it's important that we design in things such as redundancy and mitigations against DDoS attacks. Mechanisms for self-diagnosis, self-repair and healing to recover from failure should be designed into these products. Also, ensuring standalone operation is very important, so essential features should continue to work with a loss of communication and also chronicle negative impacts from compromised devices or cloud-based systems. Let's have a look at monitoring data. So as I mentioned before, AI can be used in this area. So this is where you're looking at the telemetry and usage of an IoT product to look for any anomalies and counter against it if some new behavior is seen. So it's important that regular monitoring is implemented on the device to verify the device behavior. Also conduct periodic audits and reviews of security controls to ensure that the controls are effective. Personal data deletion. Devices and services should be configured such that personal data can be easily removed. And this also must be clear in the paperwork that's submitted with the device to make sure that consumers can easily remove their data. Installation and maintenance. Installation and maintenance of IoT devices should employ minimal steps. This is really important. You don't want complex setup manuals that have to be sent out with the device. This will simply put the consumer off, and you will also skip the security aspects of connecting up the device. Validate input. So data input via user interfaces. So if a user has to put in some information, it should be checked and validated. So an important organization in the area of IoT security is the IoT Security Foundation. So here I've put some information of their website. They are UK-centric, but they're now a global forum for IoT security. They have some excellent documentation on best practices, compliance validation, updating, etc. I recommend that you go to their website and read their information, especially if you're embarking on an IoT product design. Here's some examples of their documents. So vulnerability disclosure, this is a very good guideline document explaining what you should put on the disclosure that you provide to end customers. IoT security compliance framework, also excellent if you're embarking on a IoT development. And in summary, yes, legislation is here. So we will not have a choice in the future as to whether we add all these additional secure capabilities to our product. It will be set in law. All stakeholders now have a responsibility to comply with the code of practice detailed in the previous slides. So I encourage you to look at these codes of practice and investigate how you can implement them in your IoT product. The code of practice is designed to improve the security of consumer IoT products and associated services. Many severe cybersecurity issues stem from poor security design and bad practice in products sold to customers. So please try to implement the codes of practice as closely as possible. The secure deployment architecture that's provided by Secure Thingz complements these codes of practice. And this is done by enabling the continuation of secure practices throughout the development cycle of your product, both in manufacturing and life cycle. So here at Secure Thingz, what we're trying to do is simplify secure design and help you with your secure design. So we provide secure provisioning and programming, and we also provide products and services that will enhance the product lifecycle of your product. So that leaves me to say thank you very much for listening. I do hope you have found the information useful. Please go to our website for further information on security aspects such as cryptography, use of keys, and the use of certificates, and other information. Thank you very much for listening, and you have a great day.